we found basically through this research project, through prairie strips, that a little bit really goes a long way. So by having just small amounts of fields or small amounts of watersheds or just small amounts of a hillside, however you want to say it, by having that converted to prairie, you can really create a disproportionate amount of benefits. So benefits for native wildlife, birds, pollinators, and then also controlling soil. So we have some of the best topsoil on the planet is right here in Iowa. You can keep that soil in place, and then you can filter water and nutrients before they run off the field. So it's important to have prairie for a lot of different reasons in row crop agriculture. Diversity is going to be the biggest thing. I mean, having a wide variety of flowers that are available, but making sure that you have something that's blooming all throughout the season. So something that's blooming kind of early, middle, and late. As agriculture in Iowa has gone on through the years, we've seen an intensification, but we've also seen really like a lack of diversity of crops that are planted. You know, even 40 or 50 years ago, there were quite a few hay crops, small grains, things like that. And we've really seen this push towards an intensification of mostly just corn and soybeans. So we have a real lack of flowers, and certainly at the beginning of the summer, or the beginning of the spring, you know, when those things are coming out of hibernation or kind of waking up, you know, it's really critical to have something available for them to eat at that point, and then in the height of the summer, and then going into fall. So, you know, so something like honeybees, they're not cannibalizing their own hive, that they've got more nectar out there and more pollen that they can go capture. So just kind of having a diversity of plants blooming throughout the season is going to be the best thing for pollinators. Remnant prairies would have 200-300 species, but if you could shoot for a good mix of cool season grasses, warm season grasses, forbs, legumes, sedges, you know, if you could just kind of have a wide variety of plants and try to mimic that native prairie or mimic the original system, you're going to have the best weed control, the best erosion control, the best habitat for pollinators, all those things. So kind of a mix of forbs and grasses is going to be the best way to go. But in terms of site selection, boy, you could go in a lot of different directions. Habitat is always better if there's water available. So if you have a creek or a pond or some kind of a surface water feature, buffering that is going to be great. You know, you're going to protect kind of surface water that's flowing into that creek or stream or pond. That's going to be a great place to start. And then having that water available is just going to have wildlife like crazy. Using prairie to take out low producing areas on a farm or hard to farm areas, you know, point rows, you know, things now as equipment continues to get larger and larger and a little bit hard to maneuver in some of those small areas, it can be really beneficial to look at those spots first. In parts of the country that are a little more heavily treed, if you're having some competition from shade or from those tree roots, things like that, if it's shaded in the morning or shaded in the afternoon and you're seeing visually that the plants are just stunted and they're maybe not producing as much. Or if you have a steep hillside that maybe the soil is poor, it's heavy clay, something like that, that the yield monitor as you're combining you see goes down to near zero. Those are areas that can be great places to start. Areas of resource concern, if you see something that there's physically a gully erosion that's occurring, you know, something like that, that would be a good spot to start. Wherever the water, as it flows through the field, as it's leaving the field, that can be a great place to start, you know, an edge of the field, so you're not necessarily having to manage for both sides of that prairie strip. That can be a great place to start.
You may also, especially in Iowa, be thinking about, well, I've also got some responsibility to chip in on the nutrient reduction strategy. And maybe you're talking to some folks about establishing a prairie strip, or you're talking to some folks about establishing a saturated buffer, or installing a bioreactor. One of the things to think about once that saturated buffer gets installed or that bioreactor is installed, instead of just putting grass seed on the footprint, let's plant some pollinator seed mix on top of that footprint. Again, as we talked about before, every little bit counts. And all those bioreactors that'll be going into the state of Iowa, all those miles of saturated buffers that'll going into the state of Iowa, there's no reason there can't be pollinator habitat on top of that. And the seed cost, once you've established the bioreactor or the buffer, is trivial. So even though the pollinator seed mix costs a bit more than grass seed mix, it's lost in the sauce. And so another example where producers can stack environmental goods and services on the same footprint.
Well, the Soybean Association, Iowa Soybean Association, did a study a few years back, and actually on my farm they took my yield records and they were able to say, well, you know, you look at certain fields and you've got a pretty consistent low yield in certain areas of your field, and it really, the cost just as much to operate in those places, the cost of all the things that you pass through that area, you know, and so you're not getting, you know, a good return on the investment here. You know, the average yield, you know, it's lower in that area, and it just doesn't pay. So if you could actually stop spending money there, get it into CRP, some programs like that, that'll pay you something for the ground. A couple $100 a year is better than a loss. So, and it'll do a lot of good for the environment. It's in the corner of a field, and then it's on a slope, and it's this light soil that's eroded on the top. Plus, the shape of the waterways, that was where my point rows always were, was up along where, and so I'm going to get rid of those point rows. I'm not going to have any more point rows. I can plant the bottom of the field. I looked at my yield maps, and it's like, yeah, about 12 passes up, you know, is where I need to stop. So I kind of got it figured out where it'll be easier to farm it. I won't be trying to figure out how to get into that corner. I'll be able to just drive up to the prairie and then back away from it, you know, instead of running into a fence. I get more excited as time has gone on to just think about all the beneficial insects that are out here that need a protected environment, you know, that need all these different prairie plants. You know, there's a lot of bees and insects, and there's a lot more variety of, I think there's 29 different species of bees that are out here on my prairie, which, you know, I know there's other people have found more in their prairie, so it's like more diversity is better with that stuff. But they need certain stems in plants to make a home in. They need certain flowers to be growing, you know, so that they can get the right pollens and do well. When I think about how these spiders are out there, and the beetles too at night, and things that all the different beneficial insects, it's like having an army that's working on my fields. You know, as long as I can kind of keep them alive and provide what they need for food sources and cover, and not damaging their environment when I'm out there doing my farming. You know, I just slip along, work right with them, you know. Yeah.